My name's John Mathers, an active supporter of SRAG and RCAT, both of which I'll explain in a moment. I'm glad to be with you, and I'm glad that today we have an opportunity to talk to Elizabeth Bagley. I think you'll find it very valuable. So Zoom protocol, please, during the presentation, you're going to be muted. The presentation is going to be recorded and will be available on RCAT now at a later date, probably tomorrow. And if you have questions, put them into the chat or wait until afterwards and you can ask them then. Give us your feedback at the end. I'm going to ask for a poll and let's get underway. Thank you for being here. For those that you don't know, SRAG is the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Climate Action Group, whose support for clubs around the world. They do multi-district planning and implementing and evaluating potential service projects and building awareness. RCAT network supports the creation of Rotary climate action teams at the club level through education and organization. Working together, we can make a difference in Rotary and well beyond. And if you're a Rotarian, we highly recommend that you take action now, create an action team, become a member of SRAG, and join the network and share your projects and your successes. Take advantage of many of the speakers to inform your club or action group. This is a quick list. You don't need to go through it, but be aware that there are speakers available to come to your club and present virtually or in person. And the third Thursday of every month is a speaker. And today we have Elizabeth Bagley. So let me introduce her. Dr. Bagley is the director of Project Drawdown Learning, an initiative focused on educating people about the project's research and insight. For those that you don't know about the Drawdown project, I'll let Elizabeth explain it. But Elizabeth has been addressing climate and environmental issues for most of her working life at the California Academy of Science here in San Francisco, as well as a naturalist in the US and internationally. She has a PhD in environmental and resource and educational psychology and a master's in conservation and sustainable development. So welcome, Dr. Bagley, and I'm going to turn over so you can share your screen.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to see so many faces, some familiar and some new, but thank you so much for having me today. We are going to dive in and we are going to talk all about climate solutions. So, and huge thanks to SRAG and RCAT and especially John for all of the heavy lifting he's done and continues to do to bring climate solutions top of mind for all of us. So let's dive in and let's talk about how are we going to implement climate solutions for the next decade? And I want to start with this question. And I want to ask you, what comes to mind when you think about climate change and global warming? And I want to make sure you're all with me since I can't see all of you. Can you go ahead and type in your chat what you think? Go ahead and fill up the chat box for us, please. So we're seeing some folks say things like Armageddon. They're talking about distress, their daughters, a warming planet, fires and floods, climate justice, apocalypse, lots of people dying, sea level rise, existential threat, grandchildren, marginalized communities. Whew. Okay, folks, we are, we might need to crawl under the covers and stay there for a while. There is a lot of stuff that's really heavy, really serious happening right now in our world. And this question was posed to 14,000 people around the world. And when those 14,000 people were asked the same question, probably not surprisingly, 44% of them talked about a lot of the same things that you just talked about. They thought about the causes of climate change, things like changing weather, melting ice caps, the things that all of us are really concerned about as well. So 44% of us talked about outcomes, or the 44% of the 14,000 people. 18% talked about the causes. They talked about things like burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. So we've got 14,000 people, the majority of which are talking about outcomes or causes. And of those 14,000 people, only 3% said anything about solutions. We did have some people in the chat today mention solutions and opportunity, and I am so grateful that those were top of mind for you, because what an incredible opportunity. What an opportunity for all of us to really start a conversation about climate solutions so that we can work together to put those solutions into place in our homes, in our communities, and in our businesses. So today, my hope is that after this conversation that we have, solutions will be one of the very first things that come to mind when you think about climate change and global warming. And I know all of you are doing really important work around climate. And I hope that this talk today will show you some new climate solutions that you might be able to put into action in your world. So you might be wondering, well, what are the solutions? I have a fabulous background today. We have some new posters that will soon be available on our website for those of you who want to grace your walls with lots of climate solutions. And this is a visual representation of the solutions that the organization I work with have studied. I work for Project Drawdown, and we are the world's leading resource for climate solutions. Starting way back in 2017, which is not really way back, but back in 2017, we released a book, and that book was a New York Times bestseller, and that really launched a conversation around climate solutions. And since then, we've worked with cities, with universities, with corporations, with philanthropies, policymakers, communities, and many more folks to really turn those solutions into action around the world. We have a new publication that came out earlier this year, and I highly recommend you check it out. It's called the Drawdown Review, and that's available for free on our website, drawdown.org. So please check that out. And I am linking arms with an incredible group of folks who have done loads of research. Here are some of those research fellows that work with Project Drawdown to scour the landscape of climate solutions and really find the solutions that are available now. They're ready to go now. They are scalable, they are financially feasible, and most importantly, they are going to they're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, those heat trapping gases. So this group of folks scours the landscape to find those solutions, and then we work on telling the stories about those solutions in action. And all of that research is so that we can reach this moment in time called drawdown. So you might be wondering, well, what is drawdown? Well, if we look at this red squiggly line as the increase of those heat trapping gases over time. So we can imagine an x-axis with time, a y-axis of the concentration of those heat trapping gases. We see that those gases have been steadily increasing since basically the 1850s. And the moment of drawdown is right here. It's that blue dot where the heat trapping gases stops increasing and they start to slowly decrease. That is the moment of drawdown. And that is a critical turning point for life on Earth. And it's one that we really need to reach as quickly, as safely, and as equitably as possible. But you might be wondering, well, how do we reach drawdown? How are we going to get there? So I'm going to walk you through our framework of climate solutions. And we're going to specifically start with understanding where these heat trapping gases come from. So if we imagine that this gray rectangle is the atmosphere, and specifically the heat trapping gases that humans put into the atmosphere, we might want to know, well, where are they actually coming from? And we know that. Thanks to science, we know that those heat trapping gases are coming from 6 main areas. They're coming from the ways we use and produce electricity. That's about 25%, about a quarter of all those heat trapping gases. About another quarter of those heat trapping gases are coming from food, agriculture, and land use. We have another chunk from industry, transportation, buildings, and other energy related emissions. So it's great to know where they're coming from, but it's also important to know that this is not where the story ends. nature does us an enormous favor, and it actually removes about 40% of the heat trapping gases that we put into the atmosphere. This is nature all by itself doing what it does best. But about 60% of those heat trapping gases are left behind. And when they're left behind, it creates a thick blanket around the planet. And so knowing where the heat trapping gases come from and where they go can really help us identify the suite of solutions we need to reach that moment in time drawdown. So we've come up with this framework for climate solutions. And these categories might look really familiar because these are the sources that we just talked about. So the first S in our in our framework for climate solutions, we have 3 S's. The first one is sources. We want to make sure that we're reducing the sources of those heat trapping gases. So we want to reduce the heat trapping gases from electricity, from food, agriculture, and land use, industry, transportation, and buildings. Our second S in our solutions framework is sinks. We want to support and enhance sinks. We want to make sure that nature is doing what it does on its own as well as it possibly can. And the third S, we have sources, sinks, and society. We want to help society achieve broader transformations and really improve society. So these are the 3 connected areas for action that we need to pursue globally, simultaneously, and with determination. So today I'm going to provide you with an overview of the climate solutions that we have in hand now today to reach drawdown and to begin to come back into balance with the planet's living systems. The solutions I'm going to share today are tools of possibility in the face of a seemingly impossible challenge that many of us mentioned in the chat box earlier today. So most of you here are already part of the chorus of people who are working on climate solutions. And I am so grateful that we're in this together working on solutions. But there might be people in your Rotary clubs or in your communities who aren't yet quite singing the same song that you're singing. And so one way, and I should say, I grew up on a sheep farm in a small town in Western Wisconsin. And there's lots of folks in my hometown who aren't necessarily singing part of the chorus. And what I've found is a great way to connect with people is through our shared values. And one of my heroes in this space is a woman named Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. She's at Texas Tech in Western Texas. And she actually, she has a fabulous piece in this book. I'm going to do a little product placement at the moment because I'm just so smitten with this book. This book just came out. It's called All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And Dr. Hayhoe has a chapter in here where she actually writes about speaking at a Rotary Club in West Texas. And what she did and what really inspired me to change up this talk today is she saw on the wall of the West Texas Rotary Club, she saw the 4-way test. She saw that there was a, that these questions were posted on the wall. And she said, you know what? Let's apply climate change. Let's apply the 4-way test to climate change. So is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Well, let's use this ethical guidepost as a way of knowing how to proceed within our complex world. So let's start with, is it the truth? So is climate change the truth? Well, let's look at some data. Well, yes, first of all, it absolutely is. We've known since Eunice Foote's work in the 1850s that digging up and burning coal, oil, and natural gas produces those heat trapping gases that wrap an extra blanket around the planet. And here's what that looks like. You've seen this red curve already from the moment of drawdown. And since then, thousands of studies and millions of data points have confirmed that, yes, this is true. This is what's happening. The climate is changing, humans are responsible, and the impacts are serious. Here's what we're seeing over time. Our temperatures are very much increasing. In fact, in the last 50 years, so let's just go back 50 years, we have seen loads and loads of changes. In fact, during the last 50 years, we've seen population more than double. Our economy has grown by almost 5.5%, 5.5 times. Our food demand has tripled. Our water use has almost doubled, and our fossil fuel use has almost tripled. Ooh, that is a lot of change in the last 50 years. Now, is this situation hopeless? We might all want to pull our covers over our heads again, but the great news is that absolutely not. During the last 50 years, while we've seen more changes than the entire sum of human history combined, we've also seen some really, really positive changes. We all live longer lives. We're having smaller families. We're more literate, more urban, more mobile, more connected, and much less violent. So I like to think about this as a moment. Now, is climate change the truth? Absolutely. Is it hopeless? Absolutely not. Now, I would say, is a moment of opportunity, and it's a moment of opportunity for us to think about this next question of the four-way test. Is it fair? Is climate change fair to all concerned? Well, and the answer to that is unfortunately absolutely not. We know that the poorest and the most vulnerable among us, those who have done the least to contribute to the problem, are the most affected. These include women and children, farmers struggling to raise their crops, coastal residents losing their land to sea level rise and erosion, and indigenous people in the Arctic whose traditions are threatened and whose homes are being displaced by rising seas and thawing permafrost. So we know that climate solutions can advance social and economic equity if they're utilized wisely and well, with attention to who decides, who benefits, and how any drawbacks are mitigated. And we know that it takes intention and it takes care and courage to really move solutions forward in ways that heal rather than deepen systemic injustices. Climate change is not fair. And we have the opportunity, we have the obligation to co-create systems that are safe and equitable, ensuring that both people and the planet can thrive together. Now, will climate change build goodwill and better friendships? Well, we know that people and institutions of all kinds in all places have roles to play in this great transformation. And we know that the solutions that we are talking about today are a synthesis of collective action and wisdom that's unfolding all across the globe. So as we work together to put climate solutions into place in our communities, we can build goodwill and create better friendships, protecting our neighbors and our communities from the greatest impacts of a changing climate. Now, to wrap up the four-way test, will climate change be beneficial to all concerned? And I love this question because beyond addressing heat trapping gases, climate solutions can also have co-benefits that contribute to a better, more equitable world. Climate solutions are rarely just climate solutions. For example, those that curb air pollution are also health solutions. Others protect and restore ecosystems are biodiversity solutions. Many climate solutions create jobs. They foster resilience to climate impacts like storms and droughts, and they bring other environmental benefits like safeguarding our precious water resources. So, does climate change pass the four-way test? That's a question for you to answer. And I wonder how you might use this framing in your communities. One way that we might use a framing like this is to remember that at the end of the day, we have shared values with other humans, right? What are those values that overlap? And by beginning with our values, by showing our respect for the shared values, and then connecting the dots between what we already care about and about the changing climate, we can really have productive conversations about climate solutions and how those climate solutions can be implemented in our communities. So what can you do? There's no one right answer. There's lots and lots of ways that you can get involved. And I encourage you to keep stepping up and keep getting involved. We know that widespread awareness and understanding of climate solutions is absolutely vital to kindle agency and affect change worldwide. So the world, our society, and future generations, they need us all to be part of the solutions. So how do you do that? Well, that's up to you. The image I'm showing you right here is an image of youth marching for the climate. That might not be your style. Well, I invite you to find other ways to really focus on climate solutions. And one really easy way is to start to talk about it. Again, from Catherine Hayhoe, she talks about one of the most impactful things we can do is talk about climate change. You, just by being here today, are taking a great step on your climate journey by learning with me. And I encourage you to share what you're learning with your community. Maybe you'll give a talk at your next Rotary Club meeting. Maybe you'll call up a family member or a friend and talk about climate solutions and really start to put them into action all around the world. So let's dive into what some of these solutions are. This looks familiar. This is our drawdown framework for climate solutions. And I want to share with you today stories of climate solutions when put into place that help move us towards drawdown and help the people and the communities that we care the most about. So we're going to start by diving into the electricity sector. So since the emergence of electrical systems way back in the 1800s, society has created most of its electricity by using fossil fuels, by burning coal, oil, or natural gas. The locked up energy of those long buried plants and animals is turned into electricity as the carbon dioxide spills into the atmosphere as a byproduct. For each of the solution sectors we explore today, you're going to see what we lovingly call the bubble diagrams. And these bubble diagrams, you'll notice that the circles are all different sizes, and those are scaled relative across all of the solution sectors to show the different impact in terms of heat trapping, the amount of heat trapping gases avoided or reduced. And so you can see from this bubble diagram in particular with electricity, we have shift production as a large category of solutions. And you see that onshore wind turbines, distributed solar photovoltaics, and utility scale solar photovoltaics are quite large, but there's lots of other solutions there as well within shift production. It doesn't mean that onshore wind turbines is the only thing we should focus on. We actually need this mosaic of solutions to be put into place as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. So don't feel bad if you're like, oh, I don't live on a coast. How am I going to work on onshore wind turbines? Please don't think that that's the only thing you should be working on. We need all of these solutions implemented soon. So we can look at shifting production as one of the main areas of solutions related to electricity. We can also look at enhancing efficiency. We know that we don't need to waste any electricity. Let's make sure that we are as efficient as possible. And a third area that isn't quantified, but we know needs to be, has a lot of room for improvement, is improving the electrical system. So today I want to focus on, I'm going to share some projects that are led by Rotarians around the world. And I hope that they'll inspire you to really think about ways that you might start putting some of these projects or your own projects into action in your own community. So we're going to start today in Uganda, where access to power is expensive, it's dirty, and it's inconsistent if it's available at all. Frequent blackouts interrupt learning. The health centers aren't able to keep vaccines on hand, and students with no access to power can't study after the sun sets. So let's enter All We Are. All We Are is a nonprofit bringing sustainable energy solutions to communities in Uganda. Not only is this a climate solution through shifting the production to renewables, this solution also has those co-benefits we just talked about. It decreases energy costs by up to 80%. It improves student performance, and it helps communities thrive. In the past 5 years, the Solarize Uganda Now project has completed 32 solar installations at 26 Ugandan schools, 2 medical clinics, a women's center, and they've installed 3 solar-powered wells. The work was done in partnership with the Raleigh Midtown Club, the Rotary Club of Cincinnati, the Rotary Club of Kampala, District 7710, 9211, and 6670, and others. So some of you might be wondering, well, that's great, but how do I get involved? please contact Nathan. All We Are was founded by Nathan Thomas. He is the president of the Rotary Club of Raleigh Midtown. Or he was the president rather at 23. He was 23 years old. He was the president of that Rotary Club, and he's a future district governor in 2022. You might have read about him in one of the latest issues of the Rotarian magazine. And if you want to get involved with this project or just learn how you can do something similar, please contact Nathan. Another climate solutions sector that involves the ways that we grow and use food. So when we think about the food, agriculture, and land use sector, we see incredible opportunities for solutions around addressing food waste and diets, shifting our agricultural practices, and protecting our ecosystems. Today, I want to talk about food waste as a very, very solvable problem. And a third of the world's food is never eaten, which means that the land and resources used and those heat trapping gases that are emitted in producing the food were completely unnecessary. But food waste is a solvable problem, and it's a problem that can be solved through innovative partnerships and with the help of a hierarchy like this. So we're looking at a food waste recovery hierarchy, and we want to start at the top rather, and try to avoid getting to the bottom. So Rob Anderson of Melbourne, Australia, and he's a Rotary member there, he realized that there were a number of Rotary projects that were already underway focusing on food waste. So to help the community better understand how those various projects fit together and why it's important to have a diverse spectrum of projects, Rob mapped them onto this hierarchy. So we want to start by reducing the source, right? When it comes to food waste, we just want to make sure that we're not wasting it. And there are incredible awareness programs in the world today, like Save the Food and others doing really great work on making sure that people know that reducing our food waste is actually an incredible climate solution. For the food that can't be reduced, or the food waste rather, that can't be reduced, the next thing we want to think about is feeding hungry people through programs that collect and distribute food in your communities, and programs like Lunch Out of Landfills, which I'll talk about in a minute, that works directly with schools. After feeding hungry people, we feed animals through partnerships with supermarkets and local farms. And if the food can't be eaten by people or animals, we can explore ways to use food waste through industrial uses like biogas, bioplastics, and insect processing. We can compost the food through curbside community composting programs. So if your community doesn't have one yet, maybe that's something that you want to work on. And as a very, very last resort, it's at the bottom of the hierarchy for a reason, we send food waste to the landfill. Now, there are so many ways to reduce food waste, and the solutions not only reduce those harmful heat trapping gases, they also have the co-benefits of feeding others as well. And an example of an innovative partnership related to reducing food waste is a project called Lunch Out of Landfills. And when Joe Richardson of Frederick County, Maryland, read about the Project Drawdown's climate solutions, he decided to really bring together a bunch of partners around reducing food waste and increasing composting. So he brought together Frederick County's What's Next initiative, a composting working group, the Southern Frederick County Rotary Club, funders, Rotary volunteers, school officials, key compost, and most importantly, youth, to take action by sorting out food waste, liquids, and recyclables in 13 Frederick County schools. They weighed the waste to measure their impact, and they had food waste picked up and composted offsite. Now, please don't reinvent the wheel. Joe and his partners are not slowing down, and they've created a Lunch Out of Landfills toolkit that's forever evolving, especially with schools being hybrid virtual this year. They're figuring out how are there ways that they can connect this to the youth who are at home. So please, I highly encourage you to visit Lunch Out of Landfills and download their toolkit. This is also available on the SRAG page. John mentioned that earlier, the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. This is one of the examples of a project on that page, so you can learn more there. And if you're interested in getting involved with SRAG's Food Waste Solutions Task Force, Rob is the guy you want to call. So please reach out to Rob. He's going to come back up later on as well, because Rob and Doug White are actually leading the SRAG Drawdown Task Force. So Rob is a great person to know, rob.anderson@srag.org. All right, moving on from food into industry. So from concrete to computers, cars to clothing. Industry is the sector of production that makes all of those things. And when we look at the solutions in the industry sphere, we see things like using waste, addressing refrigerants, and improving materials. And they might seem like solutions that only large multinational companies can work on, but that's not the case at all. In the industry sector, there are solutions related to, what can we do to use waste? How can we increase composting, for example? And how might we address the refrigerants that live in old refrigerators and air conditioners? Unfortunately, refrigerants, which are called CFCs, HCFCs, and known as Freon, which is a trademark example, are really, really potent heat trapping gases, which should make sense, right? Like the molecules are great at trapping heat so that our food and our spaces stay cold. Unfortunately, those molecules keep doing their job really well even after the air conditioners and the refrigerators have been disposed of. Those gases often leak during use or disposal. And these refrigerants are found all over the world. And several years ago, City Waste Recycling in Accra, Ghana, discovered a large cache of these unused canisters of refrigerants, like the backup canisters, that if those canisters were released into the atmosphere, they would hold the same amount of heat as the carbon dioxide emissions of burning 16 million gallons of gasoline. That's a lot of heat trapping. So these refrigerants can be captured and they can be incinerated in special kilns, which breaks the molecules into a benign mixture, but there are no disposal facilities in West Africa. So the problem was really financial. Well, at the same time, in Chicago, there was a startup called Tradewater that was developing a business based on being able to sell greenhouse gas reduction credits on the carbon market. Tradewater partnered with City Waste Recycling to sell the carbon credits on the voluntary market, and they started to look around for a buyer. And they ended up finding a buyer in Intuit, the software company known for its TurboTax and QuickBooks products. So you might be wondering why in the world would Intuit care about refrigerant management? Well, the folks at Intuit had happened to stumble across Project Drawdown, and they knew that refrigerant management was a really important solution when it comes to reducing those heat trapping gases. And they said, you know what, let's buy those carbon offsets to be able to offset their emissions. So in addition to buying the carbon offsets, they also spurred a new market. And because of that sale, Tradewater was able to continue working with City Waste Recycling in Accra, and they swept up the remaining refrigerants there. They moved on to Costa Rica, and now they're actually working across the whole US with SREG. So we were able to connect Tradewater with SREG, and as Rotarians, your global distribution makes you the perfect group to work on this solution. So if you're interested, you can find and fetch this ferrofreon through a new SREG project. Clary is working on a pilot project that runs through the end of October. If you're interested in finding out whether or not there's some ferrofreon that you can collect, put on a pallet, and then have it shipped to an incinerating kiln, please check that out. This is an incredibly impactful project that I am just over the moon excited that SREG and the SREG members have been involved with. So it's an incredible drawdown solution. Please contact Clary if you're interested in getting involved. Switching gears to transportation, mobility has played a critical and complex role in shaping society, and the demand for it is only growing. But most of the energy that drives mobility is generated by burning gasoline, diesel, or jet fuel. So I'm still looking for an example of a Rotary-led project that's related to transportation solutions. So maybe your community will be a trailblazer in this space. Let me know if you have a great example. In Sitka, Alaska, where I live, we have a task force working to provide training for automotive technicians on electric car mechanics. So we know that, especially on this island, it's super easy for people to drive electric cars. We have all renewable electricity here. We just don't have enough electric car technicians. So we looked at the whole problem holistically and said, you know what? We need people who can fix the cars. So we're working with a local auto shop to get more people trained up so that we don't have to wait too long for people to fix our the cars. On another example, bicycling is a great alternative to cars and fossil fuel transport, especially in cities. But we know that infrastructure is essential for supporting safe and abundant bicycle use and also cutting emissions. But sometimes infrastructure is put into place without really considering some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. So thankfully, cities like Detroit are integrating adaptive bike sharing into their bike share infrastructure. This is a photo, in Detroit, where they use the same pickup and drop off point and they keep it staffed. So making bike share accessible can create more robust support for cycling investments in cities. It can increase accessibility for people with different ability levels and potentially improve health outcomes of residents, all while reducing heat trapping emissions from transportation. And we're going to talk about buildings as a major driver of emissions and specifically looking at enhancing efficiency and shifting energy sources. What I want to talk about today is one solution that Rotary clubs have put in place, which is around building clean cook stoves, a powerful action that's a climate solution, a human health solution, and a solution that improves society. Through a partnership with the New Cook Stove Project, the Yonkers East Yonkers Rotary Club in the United States, and the Ugazi community in Uganda, 100 clean cook stoves were built to create a safe, smoke and heat trapping gas-free environment. This initiative will benefit nearly 800 residents. These stoves replace the open fire kilns that kill 4.3 million people through air pollution every year. For just $1,000, an entire village is saved from the unseen danger by equipping homes with the clean cook stoves. Each stove is handmade using local materials and uses far less fuel and causes much less damage to the environment. What an incredible solution. And this example was found on the Rotary success stories pages. So congratulations to everybody who was part of that. So shifting gears from reducing sources, we also want to support sinks. And we know that land is a critical component of our climate system. We know that efficiency and clean energy are vital, but we need to remove the carbon that's already in the air. And nature provides a great solution. Plants and healthy ecosystems have an unparalleled capacity to absorb carbon through photosynthesis and store it in living biomass. Here's an image of the Rotary Club of Rosebell on the island of Mauritius, where they launched the 1 Million Trees Project as a community-wide effort to plant 1 million trees on Mauritius Island before the year 2030. They aim to have every single resident of the island plant at least one tree, and they hope that the trees will help promote ecotourism, fight deforestation, and create sustainable business opportunities. Mission Green is another campaign to plant 5 million trees a year over 5 years in Uganda and Tanzania. That's another fabulous example that you can learn more about on the SREG website, where there are also tree planting resources to help you get started. Because while I encourage all of us to use the incredible natural power of trees as land sinks of those heat trapping gases, knowing where, when, and what to plant is really critical to ensure that the planted trees thrive and that they have the desired effect of restoring lands and communities. We know that some of the planet's most critical processes happen where the sea and the air meet, as the oceans absorb and redistribute the heat and carbon, which unfortunately are both rising due to the glut of emissions in the atmosphere. And even as oceans suffer, they're also home to significant solutions. Solutions for coastal and ocean sinks center on ecosystem protection and restoration and improved agricultural practices. Here are images of the Rotaract Club in Kingston, Jamaica, where they planted 50 mangrove trees, protecting ecosystems, including mangroves, salt marshes, and seagrass meadows, supports ongoing synthesis and that carbon storage we need so badly. Mangroves also have the co-benefit of protecting ecosystems from the impacts of intense storms. So we want to reduce sources, we want to support sinks, and we want to improve society. And improving society includes solutions that we should implement anyway, even if climate wasn't an issue, by developing a more equitable society, we can actually help with climate change. We know that climate and social systems are profoundly connected. We talked about this earlier. Is climate change fair? It's not at all. And those connections open up solutions that are often overlooked. Some initiatives designed primarily to ensure rights and foster equality also have cascading benefits to climate change. They include access to high quality volunteer reproductive health care and to high quality inclusive education, which are fundamental human rights and cornerstones of gender equality. In more indirect ways, making strides in health and education can also benefit the climate. And it's critical that human rights are always centered, that gender equality is the aim, and that benefits to the planet are understood as positive ripple effects of access and agency. One way that your club might start a conversation or continue a conversation about climate solutions is by participating in the free Drawdown Eco Challenge, which is run actually by a Portland Rotarian. The Drawdown Eco Challenge is a fun and social way to take measurable action on the climate. The Eco Challenge runs year round. You can create teams and track your progress, all while putting climate solutions into place. If you're looking for some more inspiration for community level projects that you might start, I highly recommend not reinventing the wheel, but rather checking out the projects that ChangeX has on their website. They are doing really incredible work with creating blueprints of how to put climate solutions into action. And for the youth in your communities who are or have engaged in Rotary programs, you might encourage them to join the Climate Solutions Coalition, because we all have a role to play in implementing climate solutions. If we do all of these things, if we reduce sources by implementing solutions focused on electricity, food, agriculture, and land use, industry, transportation, and buildings, if we support sinks on land and in the ocean, and if we improve society through healthcare and education, we can actually reach drawdown. And I've shared a few climate solution stories with you today. You have many, many of your own climate solution stories underway in your communities. So what's next? Well, there's a lot going on at Project Drawdown these days. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about that right before we wrap up. The Spanish and French translations of the Drawdown Review will be posted on our website in the next month. So please share that content with your Spanish and French speaking friends and neighbors. We also recently released a paper aligning the Drawdown climate solutions to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I encourage you to check that out. In early 2021, you can expect some really highly produced, engaging videos that dive into the science behind climate solutions. Our own executive director, Dr. Jonathan Foley, is actually recording these videos next week. And he'll be interviewing these experts. These folks are so incredible. They will be sharing their perspectives on climate solutions through their lens of climate work. And these videos will be freely available on our website. And we encourage you to really use them as jumping off points for your discussions about climate solutions that then can lead to action. Remember, talking about climate change is one of the most important things we can all do. And soon we'll have copies of these posters available for you to download and print. They are two-sided with the solutions on one side and the accelerators on the other side. We can accelerate the changes we need to see in a number of ways. That's where we see the importance of really shaping culture, building power, setting goals, altering rules and policy. This is your PSA to make sure you vote, shift capital, change behavior, and improve technology. So what will you do? What will your community do? Hopefully you've been introduced to a range of climate solutions with really diverse intervention points across individual, community, organizational, governmental, regional, national, and global scales. It takes a whole ecosystem of activities and actors to create and accelerate the transformation that's required. So I want to bring this question up one more time and invite you to the chat box. What comes to mind now when you think about climate change and global warming? Go ahead and share with us in the chat box. All right. I see that some people are talking about the urgency. The time is now. Let's get started. Let's work with youth. Let's have hope. Let's join forces for Rotary projects. There is huge potential in lots of different sectors. The importance of policy change. There are so many places that we can all work together to reach these solutions. So my ask of you is, what will you reach towards? The reality of intervening in a complex system is that no one can do it all. And we all have an opening to show up as problem solvers and change agents and really contribute in significant ways, even when we feel small. So how might you use the four-way test to engage your community in climate solutions? Well, you might consider joining SRAG and joining RCAT and working on climate solutions. Here are the emails for Rob and Doug I mentioned. The group is building 3 teams that will focus on education, on strategy, and on collaborative relationships. So please reach out to Rob and Doug for more information on that, because we are living in a time of dramatic transformation. The basic physics, chemistry, and biology of this planet make that non-negotiable. Stasis is not an option. Society has a choice to make about what shape this transformation will take. Will we employ the collective courage and determination and the diversity of existing solutions to move the world towards a balance with the planet's living systems? Will we pursue climate action in ways that heal systemic injustices and foster resilience, well-being, and equality? Who will we choose to be at this pivotal moment in human history? Together, we can leverage the solutions that are at hand today to build a bridge from where we are now to the world we want for ourselves, for all life, and most importantly, for generations yet to come. We know that a better path is absolutely still possible, and may we turn that possibility into a reality. Thanks so much, everybody.